Greetings everyone, Jim Walker here. Welcome to my channel. Welcome back to all returning viewers. This is the second in a series of two videos dealing with bass drums, specifically various bass drums that I use in drum set situations. I got into a little bit more detailed description of the hows and whys of the video and the drums themselves in the first video in this series. Hopefully you're coming to this video having seen that already. In case you haven't, I will include links to that video in the description here as well as at the end of this video. That video focused on some of the smaller drums that I use. This is going to be devoted to some of the larger drums that I have. And we're going to start with a drum that doesn't get used that much on drum set. It has a very specific use, but I wanted to include it anyway. This is a 22-inch diameter, 12-inch deep Leedy from the 1950s. And this drum will actually get used a fair amount of time in orchestra situations, if anything resembling chamber music that calls for a bass drum sound, but where a larger concert bass drum would be a little bit overbearing. This works really well. It's a great sound to it, but is a little bit more focused and limited in terms of its volume. A lot of times when I'm playing drum set on orchestra gigs, because of the limited number of players involved, not only am I playing dedicated percussion parts, but I'm also covering some section percussion from the drum set. And I like having the right sound for the piece we're playing. And if I have to play both, say, a David Foster tune at one point in the program, and then an orchestral piece, like an orchestral overture in a different part of the program, those tend to be two decidedly different bass drum sounds. So rather than trying to make one cover for the other with limited success, if I need to, I'll add this drum as a secondary drum on the set. I'll use a slave pedal. You'll see a photo of it in a moment. Use a double bass pedal and set it up so that the slave pedal is right next to my primary pedal. This drum is off to the right, and I'll use the slave pedal to play this drum as a secondary drum. So while seated at the drum set, I have these two bass drum sounds available to my right foot. This one I keep wide open. I've got single ply heads on it, clear on the batter side, coated on the resonant side. I'll flip that around sometimes as need be. And it's just, it's an open, sustained bass drum sound. Not much more to the description than that. I try to get it to be as resonant as possible. I have the heads roughly the same tension, same pitch, to be as resonant as possible. So I'm repeating myself. Time to get on to the demonstration. This is my 22-inch Leedy. The next drum is probably the bass drum that I use most often, perhaps the most versatile, although the one that follows I think would be right there with it. This is a drum that I added to the first kit that I ever built. I mentioned in the previous video the 18-inch bass drum that was demonstrated there was part of a jazz drum set that I built for myself around 2007 or 2008. 18, 14, 12, and an additional 10-inch tom, very traditional bebop sizes. And it sounded great, and the 18 sounds great, but I wanted something that had a little more versatility. Say would be better on steel band gigs or general business things. And so I decided to add a 20-inch bass drum to match that set, and this is the drum we're going to hear now. 20-inch diameter, 16-inch depth. I can't remember, it's been a few years, I can't remember if it's a 10-ply or 8-ply Keller shell. It might be, well, I can't remember, it's either one, 8 or 10, but Keller maple shell. And the tuning on this one, the tensioning, let me try that one more time. The muffling on this one is inspired by the dynamic duo of Dave Weckl and Simon Phillips. If you're familiar with the way Simon Phillips sets up his bass drums, the form of muffling that he'll use is to take a towel, roll it up, and tape that against the batter head at the bottom of the head where it touches the shell, and use that to muffle and shorten the note of the bass drum. Uh, Dave Weckl and Remo combined to produce something more mass produced that accomplishes the same thing. You'll see a photo of that in a minute. A few years ago, I had the distinct pleasure of attending master classes by both Simon and Dave, and one of the great things about it, those two events was I had the chance to hear both of them playing their drums, not just backline, but their drums acoustically, not through a PA, not through headphones listening to a YouTube video, but to hear the actual drums in person. And I don't think it's a coincidence that after those two events, the Simon Phillips bass drum sound and Dave Weckl bass drum sound, those are my two favorite bass drum sounds of drummers on the scene right now. And this, I don't quite have it dialed in on this one, but that's kind of what I'm aiming for. At least that's the inspiration for what I've got for this. Sometimes with the heads that have the muffling built into it, particularly a ring that goes all the way around the head, you're taking out a lot of the highs of a lot of the high frequencies of the drum, which in many cases is exactly what you want. And we're going to have that in the drum following this. But I also like having the full pitch range of a bass drum. I just want the note to be a little bit shorter. So I'm taking their lead on it with this drum. Single ply coated heads front and back. I do have a porthole on the resonance side. Uh, and with the muffling in there, sometimes if I'm recording, I'll throw a t-shirt inside just to soak up some of the extra sustain, extra reflections going on inside. But essentially, I've got one of those Remo muffling devices on the batter head and a smaller one on the resonant head. So you'll hear that sound. This is again a 20-inch by 16-inch maple bass drum. So moving on to our next drum. Uh, this combined with the drum we just talked about, the 20 by 16, really illustrates my reasons for having so many different bass drums, which is to have them set up differently and have a variety of sounds available. I mentioned at the end of the description for the last drum having the single ply coated heads for a full pitch range, but just using the muffling systems to shorten the note and dampen the drum. This drum, I've gone with heads that have the muffling built in. These are older heads, but were sat on a shelf for a long time, so I think they've still got some life left in them. This is an Aquarian Super Kick 1 on the batter side, and if I remember correctly, it's called the Regulator on the front. It has its own muffling built into it, and no other muffling on this drum. This is a 1979 Ludwig bass drum. This is after they switched over to the 6-ply shell configuration, combination of maple and poplar. Um, I'd say they're underappreciated, but in recent years I've seen guys starting to pick up on the fact that these actually are really good sounding drums. No, they're not the 3-ply drums of the 60s and early 70s, but in their own way, they're marvelous drums. Uh, so this is going for more of a thump sort of sound, more of a pop sort of sound, larger diameter and just different way of muffling the drum. So this gives a different sound from what we heard with the 20. 22-inch by 14-inch depth, 6-ply Ludwig bass drum. for the final drum in this video, and thank you again for checking it out. We go with the big brother of the drum we just heard. For years I'd heard drummers using 24-inch bass drums, Tony Williams, John Robinson, many others. I'd played one once in a while. One of my teachers in college, in his teaching room, had a sonar kit with a 24-inch bass drum. Always liked it. It felt a little bit foreign to me because I rarely played that size, but it stuck with me that it was something I might want to investigate. And about 7 or 8 years ago, had the opportunity to pick up the drum you're about to hear, which is essentially the same drum you just heard, except 2 inches greater in diameter. Another late 70s, early 80s, 6-ply Ludwig. And this one, I'm not getting it yet. I'm getting in the ballpark, but I'm not there yet. This one I'm aiming for that classic Buddy Rich, Louis Bellson big band bass drum sound. I mentioned with the last drum having the opportunity to hear both Dave Weckl and Simon Phillips playing their drums acoustically, live, not through a PA, and how much that informed my sound preferences for bass drum. Same thing with Buddy and Louie. I had a chance to hear Buddy at Simsbury High School in Connecticut in 1970s, early 80s, I guess it was. I was in high school at this point. Minimal PA. There was a PA, but nothing like what we have nowadays. So I've got a pretty good sense of what his acoustic drum sound was that evening. I also got to hear Mr. Belson at a master class when I was in college. Same thing. He had a microphone for addressing everyone, for speaking to everyone, but the drums weren't mic'd up. We just heard the sound. And there's something about that classic open bass drum sound with a couple of felt strips that just really appeals to me. The Weckl and Simon Phillips sounds are my current favorite contemporary bass drum sounds, but this is also a touchstone for me, this old style bass drum thing. So I'm going for it. I'm getting there. Haven't quite got it yet. I'll never really get it because I can't play like Buddy Rich or Louis Bellson, to state the painfully obvious, but that's what I'm shooting for this one. So we got single ply coated heads front and back, felt strip on each head, and tuned a little higher than I thought I would need to, but we'll see what it sounds like. So we'll close out with this one. Thank you again for checking out this video. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to check out the first video in the series. Any comments, questions? If you have any suggestions for me to get closer to that Buddy and Louie bass drum sound for this last drum, I'm all ears. So the comment section is there. Please feel free to make use of it. Thank you again for your time, for your attention and support. I'll catch you next time.